Imagine you are on a sinking ship, right? And the Coast Guard finally arrives.
Oh, that would be a huge relief.
You would think so, yeah. But instead of throwing you a life preserver, they pull out a drill.
Wait, a drill?
Yeah, a drill. And they actively put another hole right in the bottom of your boat.
I mean, that sounds like madness. That is the literal opposite of a rescue.
It really is.
Yeah.
But that is precisely how a 19th century preacher named Charles Spurgeon viewed the entrance of the moral law into the human condition.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Welcome to Reformed Thinking. We are so glad you are listening today.
Yeah, thanks for joining us.
You are someone who wants to get to the core of dense historical material without getting bogged down in all the academic jargon.
Right, you want the substance.
Yes, the absolute bottom line of what these texts mean for your life. And that brings us to our mission for this deep dive.
So what are we looking at today?
We are investigating an 1855 sermon by Charles Spurgeon. He delivered this at New Park Street Chapel, and it is titled Law and Grace.
Based on the book of Romans, right?
Yeah, Romans chapter 5, verse 20. The goal today is to unpack Spurgeon's radical, almost offensive claim that the moral law was actually given to make human offenses increase.
Which sounds completely backward on the surface.
It really does. But we are going to look at how this startling idea sets the stage for grace to abound even more.
To set up this investigation properly, we should probably look at how Spurgeon constructs his argument.
Yeah, that would be helpful.
Yeah.
How does he lay it out?
Well, he splits the text into two distinct halves. First, he looks at how the law operates concerning the whole world, so on a massive macro level.
Okay, the big picture.
Right. And then he pivots to how it operates internally within the human conscience, which is a very micro-personal level.
So he is kind of zooming in and out.
Yeah, he wants to show the mechanics of the law from the widest possible lens, all the way down to the most intimate corners of human psychology.
I notice he opens the whole argument by pointing out the most common mistakes people make regarding the relationship between the law and the gospel.
He does, yeah. He claims there is no point upon which people make greater mistakes.
And to be honest, reading through his list, I can see these exact same errors playing out in modern culture.
Yeah.
Even, outside of strict theological circles.
It is super fascinating how he categorizes those errors. He breaks down 3 specific mistakes.
Let's go through them. What is the first one?
The first is replacing the gospel with the law entirely.
Okay, what does that look like in practice?
This is the belief that good works, benevolence, honesty, and sobriety bring salvation. You act like a good citizen, you pay your taxes, you do not hurt anyone.
Right.
And therefore, God owes you a reward.
The classic, I am a good person defense. We hear this all the time, don't we?
We really do. It is everywhere.
If you ask someone on the street what it takes to get to heaven, the vast majority will say something along the lines of keeping the golden rule or, just being decent to your neighbors.
Yeah, just being a net positive to society.
Right. They take the concept of a savior out of the equation entirely and just replace it with a moral checklist.
Precisely. Now, the second error he targets is turning the gospel into a new law.
That one sounds a bit more subtle.
It is very subtle. This is the mindset that salvation comes through obeying certain gospel commands.
So people who fall into this trap look at the New Testament not as a declaration of rescue, but as just another set of rules.
Yeah, exactly. Well, essentially, yes. Perhaps it is a bit more refined than the Old Testament, but they still treat it as a checklist for earning favor.
Like God just gave us an updated syllabus.
Right. They think the gospel is just God lowering the bar a little bit so we can finally jump over it.
Which completely ruins the definition of the word gospel.
Yeah.
The word literally means good news.
It does.
A new, slightly easier set of rules is not good news if you are already completely paralyzed.
That is a great way to put it. And then there is the third option.
Okay, what is the third error?
The third error is mixing the two. This is the belief that salvation is a combination of God's grace and human law-keeping.
So kind of a 50-50 split.
Or even 90-10. It is the idea that God does his part and you do yours, and together you cross the finish line.
A cooperative effort.
Yeah. God provides the bridge, but you have to walk across it using your own moral strength. Spurgeon says all 3 of these groups misunderstand the truth entirely.
Okay, let's unpack this. Why is human nature so magnetically drawn to that third option mixing law and grace, rather than accepting either one entirely?
That is the million-dollar question.
Yeah, because it seems like that is the default setting for almost everyone you talk to.
Well, if we look at the mechanics of human pride, the answer becomes pretty obvious. Humanity naturally wants to claim some credit for salvation.
We want to feel like we earned it, at least a little bit.
Yeah, we are wired to desire a sense of accomplishment. To rely completely on the law is terrifying because deep down, we know we fail.
Right, we know our own thoughts, we know our secret actions.
But to rely completely on grace requires the absolute death of our pride. It means admitting we bring nothing to the table.
That we are just spiritual beggars.
Exactly. So mixing them feels safe. We get the comfort of grace covering our worst mistakes, but we still get to hold on to a little bit of pride because we did our part.
We showed up, we tried hard.
Right. We want to be able to say we contributed at least 1% to the rescue. But Spurgeon's premise is that this mixture is a toxic delusion.
A toxic delusion. That is a strong phrase.
He argues that a single drop of human merit spoils the entire ocean of grace.
So to correct these errors, Spurgeon introduces a shocking concept about the actual purpose of the law.
Yeah, this is where it gets really countercultural.
I have to admit, when I first read his main thesis, I had to read it twice. He says God gave the moral law to actually make human offenses increase.
He states that the law entered that the offense might abound.
Why would a supposedly good God want to make sin worse?
It sounds like a total contradiction. We assume laws are given to prevent crime, not increase it.
Right, like speed limits are there to stop people from speeding.
But Spurgeon clarifies that sin existed long before the law was given in a formal written capacity at Mount Sinai.
So people were already sinning before Moses came down with the tablet.
Oh, absolutely. He points out that all humans have the light of nature, conscience, and tradition.
Okay, that makes sense.
He details a specific example from his 19th century context to illustrate this point, using a term from his era. He talks about the ignorant Hottentot.
Let us pause there for a second because a modern listener might hear that term and completely disconnect.
Yeah, we definitely need to address that.
That is an archaic colonial era term. What is he actually trying to say there in his historical context?
That is a necessary clarification. In the 1850s, that term was used by Europeans to describe indigenous peoples in southern Africa.
Okay.
Spurgeon is using it here as an archetype of someone completely outside the sphere of Western biblical revelation.
So he is talking about someone who has never seen a Bible.
Right, someone who has never heard of Moses and who perhaps bows down to wood and stone.
Got it.
Spurgeon argues that even this person has enough natural judgment to know right from wrong based on creation itself.
Because nature and conscience alone are enough to condemn a person.
Yeah. The stars in the sky testify to a creator, and the internal voice of conscience testifies to a moral standard.
So the written law was not introduced to make people sinners out of nowhere. They already were sinners.
Precisely. The disease was already there.
Okay, that makes sense. So how does a simple rule actually multiply offenses?
He breaks it down into 3 psychological triggers.
Let's go through those. What is the first one?
The first is by defining new sins. He says the law takes things that seem completely indifferent and makes them sins.
Indifferent things. Like what?
Consider the examples he provides. Keeping the Sabbath is a prime example. You could never deduce the Sabbath from nature alone.
That is true. If you lived on an isolated island, you might look at the complexity of the human eye or the turning of the seasons and conclude there is a creator.
Right.
But you would never naturally guess that you need to take the 7th day off from work.
No, you wouldn't. That is a positive law, revealed specifically by God.
He also mentions dietary laws from the Old Testament, like avoiding animals that do not chew the cud.
Yeah. Or the ban on wearing linsey-woolsey, which is a fabric mixing wool and linen.
Or sitting on a leper's bed. These things appear pretty harmless to the natural mind.
Exactly. There is no inherent moral weight to mixing wool and linen.
But the law suddenly attaches a massive penalty to them. By adding these specific revealed rules, the law instantly creates 100 new ways to become an offender.
It just expands the rule book massively. Now, the second way the law makes offenses abound is much more psychological.
How?
It incites rebellion. Spurgeon cites a brilliant analogy from Augustine here.
I remember this one. The lime analogy.
Yes. Human nature is like a quiet heap of lime. It just sits there looking harmless. But when you pour the water of the law onto it, it begins to smoke and burn.
I love that analogy because the fault lies in the nature of the lime, not the water.
Right. The water is just water.
The law is holy, just, and good. The water is pure.
But human depravity is excited to rebellion the very moment a boundary is drawn.
We conceive the desire to commit an act simply because it is forbidden.
Yeah, just tell a child not to touch a wet paint sign.
And suddenly touching that paint is the most desirable action in the world.
Exactly. The law takes our dormant, sleeping rebellion and makes it active, smoking, and visible. It aggravates the disease to bring it to the surface.
The third way the law increases sinfulness is by removing the excuse of ignorance, right?
Yes. Spurgeon argues that sins committed against a known code incur much greater guilt than those committed in partial ignorance.
So when you willfully trample on a clear written command, your offense is magnified.
You become a double offender.
Think about the legal system today. If you break a law you did not know existed, you are still guilty. But a judge might show leniency.
Right. Ignorance of the law isn't an excuse, but it can mitigate the punishment.
But if you read the statute, look the judge in the eye, and intentionally break the rule anyway, your guilt is compounded by your defiance.
The more light you have, the greater the guilt. And the written law is a blazing spotlight.
But this brings us right back to the tension we started with.
Which is?
Does it not seem harsh that the Creator would hand down a law that does not justify us, but indirectly causes our condemnation to be greater?
It is a tough pill to swallow.
We are looking at a system designed to crush the participant.
Well, Spurgeon actually anticipates that exact objection. He justifies God's seemingly harsh strategy by pointing to human delusion.
Delusion about our own goodness.
Yes. God knows that humans foolishly believe they can earn favor through strict duty.
We are obsessed with our moral resumes.
We cling to our self-righteousness like a drowning person clinging to an anchor. So God provides an impossibly high standard to drive us to despair.
The goal is to force us to stop trying to save ourselves. Spurgeon uses two incredibly vivid analogies to illustrate this point, and they really bring the abstract theology down to earth.
I think these are some of the best parts of the sermon.
The first is the storm at the river mouth. Imagine a person who sees a group of young men heading out to sea in a ship.
Right.
And this person foresees that a fatal, monstrous storm awaits them out in the deep water. A storm they cannot possibly survive.
So what does he do?
To save them, he sends a smaller, terrifying tempest right at the mouth of the river. He wrecks their ship on the shore before they can reach the deadly open ocean.
So the wrecked ship is the human ego colliding with the law.
Yeah.
And the smaller storm is the terror of realizing you cannot keep God's standard. It feels like destruction, but it is actually a rescue operation.
It prevents you from sailing into eternal ruin.
The second analogy is Napoleon in the Alps.
Oh, this was great.
Napoleon's army perished by the thousands crossing the Alps because the crossing seemed barely possible. When asked if it was possible, the reply was barely, and Napoleon ordered them forward.
Because human ambition will always attempt the barely possible, even if it means destruction.
Exactly. Spurgeon argues that if God had piled another mountain higher than the Himalayas right on top of the Alps, the sheer impossibility would have deterred Napoleon.
You would have looked at it, realized it was suicide, and turned back.
Saving all those lives. The law is that second mountain.
By the light of nature, people think it seems barely possible to climb our way to God through good works.
But the law piles an impossible Himalayan peak right on top of our natural duties. It demands absolute perfection in thought, word, and deed.
It is like a parent putting an impossibly high price tag on an item a child wants to buy with their allowance.
Oh, that's a good comparison.
The child thinks, I make $5 a week, I can buy this $1,000 item eventually. They are deluded by their own math.
Right.
So the parent changes the price to $1 billion. The goal is not to be cruel. The goal is to force the child to give up the math and accept the item as a free birthday gift.
That is a brilliant modern equivalent. What we are seeing here is a radical shift in how we view morality.
It really is.
This shows the law was never intended to save anyone. Its sole purpose is to make salvation by works visibly, undeniably impossible.
It forces the soul to stop climbing the mountain of self-righteousness.
And start looking for what Spurgeon calls the narrow pass of Jesus Christ's mercy.
Okay, so once the law has done this devastating shipwrecking work, the text pivots to the superabundance of grace.
Yeah, the tone of the text changes completely right here.
Here's where it gets really interesting. Spurgeon presents a highly optimistic view on the sheer volume of grace.
He really does.
We often think of sin as this massive, overwhelming force that is winning the battle. Look at the news, right?
Oh, for sure. It feels like corruption and suffering hold the majority.
But Spurgeon does some cosmic math to prove that grace vastly outscales sin.
He synthesizes his arguments into two main points. First, he looks at the sheer numbers.
What does he argue there?
He argues the saved will outnumber the damned.
That is quite a claim.
To support this, he points to two massive demographics. The first is the army of infant souls who go straight to glory.
Right. In the 1850s, infant mortality was a devastating reality for almost every family.
It was a pressing, agonizing theological topic. Spurgeon asserts that all these infants, being elect and redeemed by Christ, fly from their mother's breasts directly to glory.
Making up an enormous host that tips the scales of grace.
Exactly.
You can imagine the comfort that must have brought to his congregation.
Unbelievable comfort. The second demographic he points to is the massive population of the millennial age.
Okay, how does he calculate that?
Spurgeon calculates that 1,000 years of an incredibly populous world living under the reign of grace will easily counteract the majority accumulated by sin during the previous 6,000 years.
Wow, he really breaks down the math on this.
He pictures the sons of God flying like doves to their windows, multiplying the Redeemer's family exceedingly.
That brings us to the second part of his cosmic math, which focuses on universal scope.
Right. He points out that the earth has never been entirely without grace.
Even in the darkest moments of history, grace was present.
From the promise given in the Garden of Eden right after the fall, to the times when the righteous were hidden by 50s in caves to escape persecution.
The stream of grace might have been shallow, but it has never been entirely dry.
There has always been a salt of grace to counteract the decay of sin.
So if grace overpowers sin by the sheer numbers of humanity, what does that mean for the physical earth?
That is where he goes next.
Because Spurgeon does not just lead us in the spiritual realm. He makes this wild, highly cinematic claim about the actual planet.
It is very visual.
He says the present creation has become like a plague house, and it will burn. The last fire will consume its rags and sackcloth.
He describes the huge molten mass in the bowels of the earth melting down palaces, crowns, and empires into a single liquid mass.
Then God will breathe on it. He will cool it down.
He will create new rivers running down new-made hills and new oceans and new channels.
And he will restore this fallen world to its orbit and wear it as a signet ring on his arm.
It is a stunning visual. If we connect this to the bigger picture of what is gained versus what was lost in the fall, the disparity is massive.
Let's consider the upgrade.
Humans lost a garden of earthly delights, but they gained heavenly plains.
They lost natural biological life, but they gained spiritual immortality.
They lost robes of created innocence, but they gained divine righteousness.
So grace does not just restore the old model, it provides a complete upgrade to something completely invulnerable.
That is the crucial distinction. Adam's innocence in the garden was fragile. It could be lost, and it was lost.
But the righteousness of Christ given to the believer cannot be lost.
It is a far superior standing. The new earth is not just Eden rebuilt, it is Eden fortified so it can never fall again.
Now, Spurgeon moves from this grand, cosmic, scale-burning planets and millions of souls to something much more intimate and, frankly, frightening.
He moves to the internal human conscience.
This brings us to the second half of the sermon. The entrance of the law into the hidden man, the heart.
This is where the theology becomes deeply personal.
He brings up two vivid illustrations for the heart. The first is John Bunyan's Interpreter's House from the Pilgrim's Progress.
I am familiar with that one.
Christian, the protagonist, is led into an unswept parlor full of dust, which represents original sin.
Okay, so a dusty
A
room.
man comes in and begins to sweep. This man represents the law. But the sweeping only stirs up the dust, choking Christian.
Because the room cannot be cleaned this way. It just makes the pollution airborne.
Exactly. Then a damsel comes in with water and sprinkles the room. This is the gospel. Only then can the dust be laid down and the room cleansed.
It is a perfect picture of how the law operates internally. The law does not give power to subdue sin. It only revives it and makes it fly about, choking the conscience.
You cannot legislate a clean heart.
No, you really cannot.
The second illustration is the dark cellar. Spurgeon describes the human heart as a dark cellar full of lizards, cockroaches, and reptiles.
That is a pretty horrifying image.
It is. In the dark, we do not see them, so we think the cellar is fine. We think we are basically good people.
But the law takes down the shutters and lets the blazing light in, revealing the terrible infestation.
So how does a simple rule actually multiply offenses internally?
Spurgeon breaks down a 5-step psychological progression when the law enters the conscience.
Let's go through those 5 steps. What is the first one?
First is discovering sin. The law drags secret faults into the light.
So things we once called peccadillos, trifles, or the freaks of youth are suddenly magnified to their true size.
Right, they are revealed as severe crimes against a holy God.
Step 2 is revealing blackness. You brought up Spurgeon's basket of fruit analogy earlier in our prep for this deep dive.
Yes. If the top layer of fruit, which represents our outside visible behavior, is bad, the bottom is guaranteed to be rotten.
Because we always put our best goods in the window.
Exactly. If the visible stuff, our public behavior, is flawed, the hidden stuff in the heart is infinitely worse.
Spurgeon says the heart is deceitful above all things, worse even than the devil.
Step 3 is exposing inbred depravity. The law cuts past the symptoms to the root.
It shows that sin is not just a flesh wound.
No, it is not the result of bad examples or a tough childhood or systemic societal issues. It is a poison in the marrow. It is in the blood.
Let us linger on the mechanics of step 4, which is condemnation.
This is a heavy one.
How does a moral rule give someone a glimpse of hell? Spurgeon says the law mounts the judgment seat, puts on the black cap, and sentences the soul to death.
And it leaves the person completely speechless. The psychological weight of this is immense.
Imagine standing in a divine courtroom. You have brought your moral resume, your charity work, your polite behavior, your good intentions.
But the standard is absolute perfection. The law reads the charges, including every hidden thought and selfish motive.
The realization hits that your resume is absolutely worthless.
All your apologies and excuses just evaporate. You basically put the rope around your own neck and agree with the verdict.
Which leads to step 5, total inability.
The law does not just condemn, it kills.
The smitten sinner finds they can no more pray than they can fly. Spurgeon describes a state where a person feels as though they cannot feel.
And they grieve because they cannot grieve. The ruin is absolute. They are cast out like a corrupt carcass.
But wait, I have to push back here.
Go ahead.
To a modern listener, this level of self-loathing sounds psychologically destructive. We spend billions of dollars on therapy to fix this exact feeling.
We try to build self-esteem and avoid feeling like a corrupt carcass.
So how does Spurgeon justify pushing the listener to this point of total, paralyzing despair?
It is probably the most controversial part of this theology for a modern audience. We view low self-esteem as a problem to be solved.
You're right.
But we have to look at how Spurgeon views this devastation. For him, recognizing this total inability is the absolute prerequisite for grace to enter.
So you have to hit rock bottom.
If you think you can help yourself even a little bit, you will reject the rescue. You will try to swim and you will drown.
The devastation is the cure.
Moses, representing the law, smites the sinner, bruising and mangling them until they fall dead. Only a dead person stops fighting the rescuer.
So the law has to kill the ego so the gospel can resurrect the soul.
Exactly. That brings us to the final rescue. Superabounding grace, entering this devastated, completely ruined heart.
This is the triumph of grace in the soul. Spurgeon quotes this striking poetry. If all the sins that men have done were laid on one poor sinner's head, one act of remission cancels it all.
The stream of Jesus' precious blood removes the dreadful load.
And he shares a personal anecdote, which I think is just beautiful.
Yeah, tell us about that.
He talks about walking into a chapel one morning, feeling as miserable as hell, sitting in the pew as a chained and imprisoned sinner.
And then
the word of God came, and he walked out free, with a sparkling eye, feeling whiter than driven snow.
That is a massive shift. He draws out 3 specific ways grace excels sin internally.
Let's break those down. First is its origin.
While the law traces sin back to our own deceitful hearts, grace traces its origin directly to the King of Kings.
God adopts the wretched, pallid, sick criminal at the bar. He takes the outcast of society and makes Jesus their actual brother.
The second way grace excels is permanence. And here he drops a theological term that might need some defining.
Yeah, he calls justification no Arminian sham that can be reversed if a person turns aside.
Yes, let us define that term.
Arminianism is a theological framework that believes, among other things, that salvation can be lost or depends on continuous human cooperation.
Yes. Spurgeon, coming from a Reformed perspective, completely rejects that.
His point is that justification is permanent. The debt cannot be demanded twice.
If Christ paid the penalty in the divine courtroom, the punishment cannot be inflicted again on the sinner. The sentence of grace can never be reversed.
Once justified, Satan himself cannot lay hands on you. It is a legally binding, eternal verdict.
The third way is joy and fitness.
The law leaves you with an aching heart, feeling like mountains are ready to drop on you.
Grace replaces that with a light heart.
It renders the depraved sinner fit for the company of seraphs, requiring absolutely zero works, no fitness, no righteousness, and no doings of their own.
The person who felt like a corrupt carcass is now wearing a crown and holding a golden harp, entirely by the merit of another.
So what does this all mean? How does the listener take this 1855 theology and apply it to their mindset on a random Tuesday?
The synthesis is this. The law was a deliberate, severe mechanism designed to eliminate any delusion of self-reliance,
It paves the way for a grace that overcompensates for every failure.
both globally and internally. You are worse than you think you are, but you are far more secure than you can possibly imagine.
If the specific function of the law was to bring us to complete powerlessness so that grace could take over entirely, perhaps those moments when you feel like you have failed the most spectacularly are not deviations from the plan.
That is a powerful thought.
What if your greatest spiritual failures are the exact mechanism God is using to destroy your self-reliance, forcing you to finally drop your resume and step into absolute freedom? Thank you for joining this deep dive into the source material. We will see you next time.